Well, we're shredding tofu on a box grater. We're really changing the texture of the tofu, and that's really the basis of this dish. It is a quick, fast, easy weeknight meal that's very plant-friendly, and I think we're gonna have some fun with it. If you have never shredded your tofu on a box grater, which I have a feeling you probably have not, I know until I found this recipe, I never did either. It just really does change the texture, not only of the dish, but also it increases the surface area of the tofu, making it, just able to absorb a little bit more flavor. Hi, I'm Judy Matesky. I'm a registered dietitian and culinary nutritionist with Athens Nutrition. And today we are cooking, as always, with fairly few ingredients, most of which you probably have in your pantry anyway, with maybe a couple new things that we'll talk about. All right, so this is shredded tofu with shiitake mushrooms. And the one thing that I want to get going right away is I want to start browning these shiitake mushrooms. So there's a little bit of a twist here. A lot of recipes will have you brown the tofu, or maybe if you're cubing the tofu and you're going to sear it a little bit on each side to give it a little bit of texture and some crunch. We're not going to do that. We're going to try to rely on the mushrooms a little bit to bring some brownness to the dish, and the tofu is not going to be browned. All right, so shiitake mushrooms, I don't know if you're familiar, these are just so flavorful, and that's what really kind of, again, adds a lot of flavor to the dish, because we have to keep in mind that tofu doesn't really have a whole lot of flavor, so we need to rely on other flavors to really enhance the dish. So we're using shiitake. It's about 8 ounces. I bought them in this container. These are about 3.5 ounce containers. I only bought 2 packs of them, and I ended up just adding some baby Bella mushrooms with it as well because I had them, so I wanted to use them up. So I already thinly sliced them, but I just wanted to show you real quick. With the shiitake mushrooms, even though they're fresh and not dried, the stems are a little bit tough. So I don't usually cook with them, and I'll just sort of pop them right off and sort of toss them to the side. And then we're just going to slice these down into just slices. I'm going to turn while I'm doing that, let me just turn my burner on because I want to get the oil, and we'll talk about that oil here in a second. I want to get this somewhat shimmering. I want that oil to be a little bit hot when I add these mushrooms. Okay, so we're gonna just slice these down. And again, shiitake mushrooms, when I'm cooking with them, they don't seem to put off as much water as some other mushrooms do. They're a little bit drier, which is kind of nice because they can tend to get brown and crisp up a little bit better. So that is one advantage. And the oil that I'm using is peanut oil. And if you're not familiar with peanut oil, this is really a nice oil to keep either in your pantry, in your refrigerator. It will get more solid in the refrigerator, but peanut oil is a really nice oil when you're trying to use high heat, whether you're stir frying or you're trying to really brown something up. I love olive oil, and I use that probably 95% of the time. But sometimes I like to grab my peanut oil if I want to do something, particularly with an Asian flair. I like that it doesn't add necessarily a peanutty flavor, but I like also the nutritional profile. It's a nice balance of, monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats, and it's low in saturated fat, which is what we really want. So this is a nice oil to sort of have around. I have about 2 tablespoons here at the bottom of this pan, and I'm just using a really big wide skillet. I do have a wok, which I could have used, but I feel like it's a little easier for you to see it if I use a lower skillet. So this is, I guess, maybe a 10-inch, I don't know, really bad with measurements, but a pretty decent sized skillet you want. And we want to get that, you really kind of want the oil to start to a little shimmer, which it sort of is. So I'm going to go ahead and add these in, but you should hear a little bit of a sizzle. I'm hearing it. It could be a little bit hotter, but that's okay. So you're not really supposed to crowd your mushrooms in the bottom of your pan if you truly want to create a crispy brown edge with your mushrooms. Ideally, if you're really, really wanting to do this the right way, you would brown these mushrooms in 2 batches. So you would do half, get them brown, take them out, and then do the other half. For time's sake, I'm going to throw them all in. I'm just going to crank the heat up a little bit higher, see if that'll help. But like I said, the shiitake mushrooms tend to have a little less moisture in them, so I find that they tend to brown up a little bit better than some of the other mushrooms. All right, so I'm going to let these go. I have my heat up. They're going to just sit here, and I'm not going to try to touch them too much, so sometimes that's beneficial with mushrooms. You just kind of let them sit in the pan, and don't be tempted to kind of play with them. They will brown a little bit better for you. So initially they start to brown, then sometimes they release their water, and you're like, oh gosh, now they're going to get soft and kind of more mushy, but they don't. That once that water evaporates back off again, they'll start to brown right back up again. So, all right. So we have that. Now we're going to make a sauce, and this recipe is from Melissa Clarke from the NYTimes. I just modified it a little bit. I think the idea of shredding tofu, Melissa said, really comes from Heidi Swanson from 100 Cookbooks. That seems to be her idea. But Melissa Clarke's recipe is a little bit different. A few more extra ingredients that I kind of pared back on just to make it a little bit simpler. But you can mix and match some flavors here. So I'm going to use some things that I just happen to have in my refrigerator. You might want to swap out other things. The main thing with the sauce is that we are going to be using a lime, and I'm going to add the zest of the lime in addition to the juice. And the one thing that I added, which is not in the original recipe, is because I love this crunchy garlic chili crunch that's not too spicy, I'm going to add that to my sauce, which is not in the original recipe, but I just love the flavor. And I have probably just a little over a tablespoon left in this jar, so I'm going to use it up. And then we're going to use some soy sauce, our tamari, which is usually what I use. And because I sort of like to have my recipes not so salty, again, from a health perspective, from a lot of the followers and a lot of my clients, they're really sometimes watching their sodium intake. So I usually do purchase the less sodium soy sauce because it is even less sodium. It's still flavorful, and you're going to get enough sodium. So there's about 2 tablespoons, and most of the time I eyeball things and I don't measure, but I thought, well, I'm going to measure today because I'm going to see how close do I get when I think something's a tablespoon. Do I really get a tablespoon? And I would say I would probably, you know what, I'm going to add a little bit more, to tell you the truth. I'm going to add another tablespoon because with this recipe, I'm going to be throwing in a little more edamame than the recipe calls for. I'm going to be using more scallions than the recipe calls for. So for that reason, I think I even have a few more mushrooms than I think I might have 9 or 10 ounces. I'm just going to add a little more sauce so I make sure I have enough. And then we're going to add, the recipe's about 2 teaspoons of a dark sesame oil. You really want that flavor. I'm just going to add a little bit more than 2 teaspoons to mine, but that sesame oil flavor goes a long way. So we have the soy sauce, the sesame oil, and now I'm going to add this tablespoon of my chili crunch. Actually, a little more, but I'm just going to use up this jar. And I just get this particular brand off of, it's the S&B umami topping. I get it off of Amazon. I did notice it. I did see it in Whole Foods the other day, so you can get it there. And then we're going to, the recipe originally doesn't call for the zest of a lime, but I want the zest and I want the juice of about half a lime. I might use this whole lime. These limes are really small right now. It's not be really lime season. I'm noticing that in the market they're really tiny. So I'm going to zest this a little bit because I want a little more intense lime flavor in this. And that's the nice thing about these kinds of recipes too, is that what we're really doing is we're really building some great flavor. So, we have a little salty, a little umami, a little spicy, a little tangy from the lime juice. And that's what really helps to build flavor and make dishes really interesting, is when you have all these different flavors working together, as well as different textures. So, ideally those mushrooms will be maybe a little bit crispy. And then you're going to have the soft tofu, and then we're going to top it with some fresh herbs and a little crunch from some scallions. All right, so there's most of my lime zest. And then I'm going to use the smaller lime to, now actually I'm going to save that because I want some lime wedges. So let me cut this in half. And again, the recipe is about half of a lime, but this lime, I could tell when I went to roll it on, if you want to get the most juice out of your lime, if you can roll it on your counter a little bit or even pop it in your microwave for maybe 15, 20 seconds, that'll release more of the juice. I could tell when I was rolling this lime that this was going to be a relatively dry lime, and it is. So because of that, I am going to use the whole thing to get as much juice out of this as possible. And then we're going to finish with a lime wedge anyway. So again, sometimes when you have things that are spicy and salty, it really is nice to serve them with something that's acidic, like a lime wedge or a lemon wedge. It just really adds that brightness, and it enhances the flavor even more. All right, let me just my hands off here. Okay, so my mushrooms are doing well. So I have the sauce pretty well completed. All right, I'm gonna just set this aside. Now the other thing I wanna do is I'm gonna just, since I have instead of chopping and since I have my shredder, my microplane out, I'm gonna go ahead and microplane 2 garlic cloves. If you don't have, well, because, you know, if you're zesting your limes anyway, you already have the sturdy. So again, I'm all about not creating any more dishes that you need to wash at the end as possible. But since I already have this out, I'm going to go ahead and use it. Normally, I would just chop them with my knife because I don't always have my microplane or my zester out. All right, so I am going to now disturb these because I can see that they're browning. Even though I put more than I should have in here, they're doing a pretty good job of browning up. So that is good. And that just mostly because I have a pretty high heat. So I'm going to just let these go. And you can hear them, they kind of squeak. I feel like mushrooms sort of talk to you when you saute them. They get a little squeaky. All right, I'm going to turn it down a little bit. Okay, so let's finish up. So it's 2 cloves of garlic. And then I have about, I don't know, 1 inch, 1.5 inch knob of ginger, fresh ginger. And I'll tell you, sometimes, like not until recently, I ran out of my fresh ginger, and I was just using ginger powder, and this was working just fine for me in a lot of recipes, particularly when you're making like a sauce. It really works well in a sauce. And sometimes when you're using, you know, like powdered spices like garlic or onion powder, if you're doing something like, let's say you're breading a chicken breast or even a tofu wedge or a tofu rectangle, and you're trying to get the flavor of garlic, but when you're browning it or you're putting it in a broiler, well, that garlic burns, and that is really a very acrid flavor. It's not very pleasant. But if you use like garlic powder instead, then it won't burn. And so, you know, there is a place for using garlic powders, ginger powder, you know, onion powder, and it doesn't always have to be fresh. So just because you don't have fresh, don't skip it. Just use what you have in your pantry, because most likely, if you're cooking fairly regularly, you probably have those in powder form. All right. So I've got my ginger pretty well zested here, or minced. And then let me try to get it off the back of this. All right, so now this all comes together really quickly. The only thing that we really still have to do is we're going to shred this tofu, and I wanted to talk about that. I'm going to pull this off heat for a minute. So when we're shredding the tofu, the easiest way to do it is a box grater. And then what I do, I don't really need to do that right for this recipe right now, because the tofu that I purchased it's firm tofu, but the texture of this tofu is more like extra firm. So if you get extra firm tofu, there's not as much water in it. So when you shred it on your box grater, actually I'm gonna just cut it in half and I'll shred it half at a time. Just when you're doing things, you know, try to make them so that you're able to hold things a little bit more comfortably. That was just too unwieldy to try to do the whole block. So do half at a time. And we're really just basically shredding. And it's nothing special here. We don't have to have perfect shreds. We're really just getting this into smaller pieces is what we're doing. So it's a little bit easier to do this than to try to crumble it. I mean, you could. If you don't have a box grater, you could just crumble it up. But most of us probably do have some sort of a shredder here or grater. So anyway, if you find that your tofu though is a little bit watery, you can, once you take it out of its calcium bath, which is actually kind of nice because it does add calcium to the tofu, which is always good. Once you get it out of the container and you drain it, if you wrap it in some paper towels or a dishcloth, you know, and kind of squeeze it a little bit, you'll get a lot of the moisture out. Sometimes I'll press it if I need it to be really dry. This doesn't have to be really that dry because we're not browning the tofu. But if it is, I do have this now on a paper towel. because the recipe says to grate this on a paper towel and let it kind of sit a little bit and it'll drain while you're kind of making the sauce and while you're doing other things. It doesn't have to sit on a paper towel very long. But this one was pretty dry, so I don't really need to drain it. It's just the type of tofu that I had. So tofu is a great protein source, and if you look at the container, it's about 9 grams of protein per serving, which is really good. And in this dish, we are not only relying on the protein, we're also, of the tofu, we're also using edamame. So we're adding extra protein. So there's about 9 grams per serving in edamame, as in tofu. So this is a really good plant protein forward meal, right? So I love that about this. So it's, we're not really relying on, chicken or maybe some other animal proteins. All right, I'm gonna move it back. So my mushrooms, I think you can see, they're looking pretty good, right? I could probably even let these brown a little bit more, but it looks like most of the water has really come off of them. So at this point, I'm gonna add in the ginger and the garlic. And then I had already pre-chopped my scallions. So it calls for 4 scallions, but I had 8, and I want to use them up, so I'm doing 8. And I love scallions in a dish. The more the better for me. So this is about 4 scallions. That's why it might look a little bit more than when you're making it, but it's up to you. Use the amount you have if you want to. Just want to break up the garlic and the ginger a little bit. Okay, and then we're just going to saute this up just a little bit, not a whole lot, just to get that garlic browned a little bit, so we can take some of that garlicky bite out of the fresh garlic. So we'll get that going. All right. So you can see how quick this is. This is a really quick meal. I'm talking a lot, so it's taking longer than it would. But if you were doing this during a weeknight, it comes together. So it's a teeny little bit of chopping, but not a whole lot. All right, so now, again, this is, you want to maybe brown this, turn a couple minutes, a minute or two, just to get the garlic and the ginger browned up a little bit. I can smell it, so I can tell that it's really, because I have my heat on a little higher than what you might be using. All right, so now we're going to add the edamame. And again, I think the recipe only calls for half a cup. It's up to you. I'm going to just use this whole pack because I don't want to use just half of it and then have the other half. Which is fine because edamame you can put on everything, so I wouldn't certainly waste it. But I think I'm just going to use the whole thing for this. So let's add that. And edamame not only is a good source of protein, but it's also a great source of plant compounds, particularly called isoflavones. And there's been a lot of research around isoflavones, and it seems that the real benefit from them tends to be in their, again, I feel like we say this a lot, but they're in their antioxidant value, which antioxidants are just cell protective. So our cells are always taking a beating from all kinds of oxidation and all things that are going on in our environment and all sorts of things we eat and all things we're exposed to. And anytime we're eating foods that provide some antioxidant value, that just provides some healthy protection. So it's always nice, and plant-based foods are really going to do that for us. All right, so we have that in. Now I'm going to take the tofu that's on the paper towel, and then we're just going to, the shredded tofu, add that in. And then the last thing that we'll do is we're just going to add the sauce. And the sauce, like I said, I've added a little bit more. Sometimes when I make things like this, depending on the amount that I add, if I'm not following the recipe exactly to the amount of tofu or the amount of edamame or the amount of mushrooms, sometimes you might end up with more of those ingredients, and then it doesn't quite seem like there's enough sauce. So just keep that in mind. If that's the case, then, just make a little bit more sauce. That's fine. All right, so this just gets mixed around. So like I said, we're not really browning the tofu. What we're doing is we're just warming it up. And what this texture, it's really interesting because when you eat it, it's really good, but you're not exactly sure what you're eating. It seems like it could be like ground turkey breast or ground chicken breast. Like, you're not exactly sure because most of us are not used to having tofu in this, in this format, in this shred. It's usually, usually tofu is usually either in squares or rectangles or You know, it's not often that it's shredded. All right. So this is basically, we want to warm it through. Now we're going to go ahead and top it with our sauce. Mix that in. I'll turn the heat up a little bit more since we now have some liquid here. And then that's it. We're just tossing it around in the sauce, and that's it. And you're just warming it through, and it is done. So you could serve this. Sometimes I just love to serve this with a really good side leafy salad, green leafy salad. If I don't particularly want if I don't want it quite as heavy, if we need more of a satisfying meal, then you know, cooking up some brown rice. I'm gonna you know, cross cuisines, and because I have whole wheat orzo, and I have 2 packets of it, and I'm actually more of a pasta lover than I am a rice lover, although I do like rice. I'm going to use that tonight. I'm going to just serve it with some orzo rather than with rice. But again, whatever you want, you could. This would be really good, even in like pita pockets, like some whole wheat pita bread, toasting it and like put it inside. I think that would be really great. All right, and then the way to serve it. So hopefully you can see it. It looks really nice, doesn't it? It smells so good. I mean, it's delicious. I've made this several times, and it's really been a hit with everybody that I serve it to. You're not going to miss meat lovers or animal protein lovers are not going to miss the chicken or the pork or anything out that they might be used to, because it's just really flavorful, very satisfying, and has an interesting texture. So then to serve it, then you'll just do, I have some leftover scallion tops that I also had some chopped parsley. If you like cilantro would be better, but my family does not, so I usually end up having to use parsley. Parsley, I had some chives in my refrigerator, so I added chives. So chives, parsley, and scallions. So, you know, to dish it up, I'll just show you. And then I would definitely serve this with, I would serve this with a little bit of the scallion tops, a little bit of the extra herbs. I'm making a mess here. And with a lime wedge. So just if you have that, if you zested your lime and then you only used half of your lime, you'll have the other half to wedge. Since I used the whole one, I'm gonna cut another lime and then serve it with that. And because I have them, not that you can keep going, you can top this with all sorts of things, but because I have them, I do have sesame seeds. So I think I'll just sprinkle a few sesame seeds on top. And there you have it. So here is the shredded tofu with shiitake mushrooms. You can really make this in about 15 minutes, honestly. It took me maybe a little longer because I was talking. But a little zest of lime on top. Serve it with brown rice. Serve it with, I'm going to serve it with orzo, which would obviously not be typical or traditional. But anyway, I hope you enjoy it. Reach out if you need any nutrition advice. Always reach out, email me, message me. Always here to answer any questions that you might have. All right, stay well, eat well. Remember, cooking is a very powerful health behavior. So get in the kitchen and do some cooking. All right, stay well till next time. Bye-bye.